is remember to hit the record button when you want to record a session. So I'm going to go back here just for a second. So if you're interested in online teaching, one of the first things you want to know is what is online learning. And so in this particular instance, one thing that I feel is that if we cross out the word online and we just say what is learning, that is the epitome, one of the things that we're striving for. So one of my favorite quotes is when they just call it learning, we know that we've been successful. This next slide has a word cloud, and what a word cloud is just a compilation of words, and the more often a word is used, the bigger it gets in the image. Our center had done a benchmarking activity of the AAU institutions and who was doing online learning. And from that study, we realized that everybody calls it something different. Online learning seems to be the largest trend so far, distance learning, hybrid learning. But if you notice, every one of these pretty much has the word learning in there. So I just wanted to share that with you, and it's all the same thing. It's all about learning. One concept that relates to online learning is that there is a continuum. We can go from the cell that's at the very top of this table that describes a fully online course, and that is a course that does not require the student to come onto campus. It uses either synchronous or asynchronous technology, and I'll talk about that and the differences in a minute. And then a little bit down in that continuum, you have kind of a combination. A hybrid or a blended course is a course that has a very strong online component, but there's reduced face-to-face time for the meetings in the class. And then at the bottom of the continuum, and I would say that probably 99% of our classes fall into this, a web-supported course. So if you're teaching online and you're using something like the Blackboard Course Management System, that's considered a web-supported course. It's online learning also, but it's not at the top part of that continuum. And basically, when you go from the bottom to the top, when you get into a fully online course, technology is used much more heavily as a mediation method. So this slide just talks a little bit about the differences between synchronous and asynchronous learning. And the difference, basically synchronous is something that we're doing right now. So it's real time. You are connected to a web conference. We're talking together. You can have a conversation with myself. You can have text conversations with your colleagues, and it's live. The examples of synchronous is if you use instant messaging, some online chat, webcasting, such as we're doing, and then you can also just have audio web conferencing. Sometimes just having a class use small groups with group phone connections is considered synchronous learning. In comparison, asynchronous. So that is, not at the same time. Asynchronous would be, I would go to my course management system and log in, and my students would go to the course management system and log in at a different time. So we don't have to be in the same place at the same time. It's one of the great benefits of online learning because of so many people's availability now. People are working and going to school at the same time. It's hard to get people together at a single time and place. So the synchronous helps with the place. We can have conversations with people all over the world, but the asynchronous also alleviates the time crunch. People can be on at any time of day or night depending on what their schedule helps them with. And some examples would be using email to converse. Discussion boards are a big part of asynchronous learning. Podcasts is another way to share content. Small lecture videos that are recorded and shared are used often in asynchronous learning also. Some of the key differences between online and face-to-face. In a traditional face-to-face class, and also note the acronym F2F, that stands for face-to-face. Traditionally, in a classroom, students come to the class and they really know what's expected of them. When somebody is in an online class, in certain realms, they're a little bit less comfortable. They don't know exactly how to proceed. So just one of the differences. And in an online environment, online learners will often not participate much, and they'll quickly kind of either withdraw or sometimes disenroll in a course. It's a bigger job for a faculty member to try to motivate students and keep them involved and keep them engaged, because there might be tendencies for online learners to quit more quickly. In an online class, instructors need to take a much bigger role in the technology aspect. That doesn't mean that an online instructor needs to be fluent in every aspect of every technology. There's no way that anybody can do that. But having a little bit more comfort level relating to technology use is useful in an online environment. Feel free, though, to continually learn with your students about the different technologies and have them introduce technologies that they might be comfortable communicating and collaborating through. Another difference is that online learning environments are sometimes a little more student-driven. So in order to facilitate community, the online environments have students working together. Sometimes that's done in small groups. Sometimes it's done just by having students in shared discussion forums. So those are just a few of the differences. And if you would like to see where those suggestions came from, there's a link on the screen pretty much for every resource that I'm sharing. So you can go and read about that in a little bit more detail. Some tips for being an effective online instructor is that it's extremely important to be organized. In a traditional course, a student could say, hey, faculty, I don't know where the syllabus is, or I don't know what to do in this assignment. It's less likely, but not impossible, for students to raise questions in an online course. So it's more important to be very organized. Organized in your schedule, in the syllabus, in the way that you have the course modules put together, where they would find the assignments. Be very explicit, especially in relation to the expectations or your learning objectives for each of the modules. So it's good to have some objectives listed right within the course screens. Sometimes it's good to link to pieces from many different areas of a course. So if you have an assignment, you can link to it from the syllabus, but also when you're in the module, give a direct access to that assignment. And it's also important to share options for learner support. So by that I mean, if you're asking your students to do a web conference, it's good to share with them information about a tutorial about how to use the online system. If you're asking your students to use some sort of technology, share tutorials right within the description of the assignment on where they can find that. In your syllabus, make sure to share information about how online learners can access resources on campus, possibly accessibility resources. How would they access the libraries any differently? How did they request technical support? Put that information all together in your course. Some people have been creating little webinars that might walk a student through their syllabus. So just like I'm doing here, I'm sharing a screen and I'm talking through a webinar. I put the record feature on, and if this were my syllabus on the screen, I could talk my students through what the syllabus is asking. Pretty much the same way you might do is if you're having a first day of class, you might talk your students what's expected in the course and what's on the syllabus. In an online environment, you could do the same kind of thing, but you might do that in a recorded way. Some other really big tips that I might share is provide a variety of materials for students and also a variety of tasks. So we do know that many learners learn in different ways. Some prefer visuals, some prefer having a message in an audio form or content, and reading is another mode. So sometimes you might want to give your students articles to read in addition to supporting videos, supplemental materials that if somebody doesn't understand what the content is trying to get across in the written materials, they might be able to go watch a TED video or some other video content, maybe video that you create that also shares the same kind of information. Students might not be required to participate in every type of material that you share, but it's a good idea to share a variety of materials. At the same time, you also want to provide a variety of tasks. So I'm going to go back to that quote, when we just call it learning, we know we've been successful. In a traditional course, the same thing is true. You don't want to just give your students, okay, so we're going to do one paper, one multiple choice quiz, call it a day. You do want to kind of mix up the different types of assessments that you ask students to participate in. So try to be creative as you're figuring out what are the learning objectives of the course, what are the learning objectives of each particular module, and then how are the assignments that you design, how are they going to match up to help those students demonstrate that they understand the different different modules and objectives that you have in your course. And please feel free, if anybody has any comments as we're going through, please feel free to add something to the chat or even interrupt or raise your hand. That would be great. Another aspect to teaching online that is been shown through the research to be highly beneficial is to try to build community. So by this, there's a lot of research out there about the community of inquiry, and so that would be something that I would suggest that you look into if you are interested to teach online. And the community of inquiry consists of 3 different presence: social presence, teaching presence, and cognitive presence. And they are just trying to convey that a social presence is having students communicate with each other and learn from each other. The teaching presence is to make sure that the instructor is continually present in the course, so that if a student comes in an online course, they know that you're there. So participating in the chat, participating, answering questions, maybe through a discussion forum, participating in the discussion forums. Also, try to put your personality into a course. It's recommended that, when you're in a face-to-face class, you often go in and you tell the students a little bit about who you are, what your interests are, what your background is. You can do the same thing in an online course and just do that through a short video recording. And just try to speak with your own voice. Sometimes my writing tends to go a little bit towards the more formal writing, but if you can be more conversational with students and speak, bringing the content back to actual issues that relate to your experiences, that's good. Sorry, I changed the screen here. And you want your students to build community. So when you are having students communicate in an online discussion, sometimes it's a good idea to require students to respond to each other. They have the ability to participate in discussions. Often I'll put a statement in a discussion forum that says, this week's question or the guiding question for the discussion is, etc. Please make sure to put your first response into the discussion at least a couple days into the week, and then make sure to reply to at least one person's post at least one day prior to the end of that week. It's up to you. Since it is an online course, you can determine when the weeks start and end. Sometimes a traditional calendar week, Sunday to Saturday, is a good idea. You might decide to change that up. It's up to you. But be very explicit, again, in your discussion board conversations about when do you want students to respond. And if you attach some grading to the discussion forums, that motivates your students to participate. Sometimes if you just say, oh, here's a discussion forum, feel free to discuss, you'll get a little less participation, and you might have participation from some and less participation from others. Probably one of the best things about an online course is in a discussion is for an instructor to ask questions. So you usually have a question or something that guides the discussion. As you are in there kind of acknowledging people for contributing, ask questions, ask for deeper thought. There's a lot of websites out there that have prompts that you can find. Some might be, if you were looking at this from a perspective other than your own, what might be some of the ways that somebody might support this idea? Or can you relate this discussion to your personal experiences? Or how does what you're raising in the discussion relate to what these other students said? What are the similarities or differences? So one of the best ways to build community is to ask questions as the instructor in an online course. You do want to make sure you're present in a course, just like in the community of practice, teaching presence does support that, but you don't want to be too involved. A lot of times I might be guilty of that, so I'll be in there commenting to a lot of what people are saying, and if that happens, then often the other students will say, oh, the instructor is going to be there and she's going to be the first one to respond, so I don't need to respond. So you kind of at the beginning of the course maybe kind of build in much more interaction and then continually try to pull people into conversations, and then hopefully towards the end of this course or the end of the semester you have students voluntarily participating in those discussions, and learning from and with each other helps build that community. I just noticed there's a couple things in the chat I just want to comment on. So there was Laura commented that the outcomes of students feeling like they're part of a community is a higher likelihood of student success. Laura, thanks for sharing that. I know that your research is on student persistence, so we'd appreciate that comment there. Yep, Screencast-O-Matic is one of the tools, one of many tools that can be used to create recordings, or Zoom is another great recording tool that is a really great option. And Zoom does have a free available option. So you can use, pick up and have these kind of conversations with your students using some of those free tools like Zoom. And you can also encourage your students when they have group projects to use some of these web conferencing tools together. So that brings us to the next point. Use groups, especially if you have some really large classes. Having a discussion amongst 20 people is difficult. It's doable, but sometimes you might be better off considering how can I break this up into smaller groups and maybe have groups of 5 have a discussion, and then maybe have somebody designated as the lead for that group who might summarize the conversation to a larger full class discussion at the end of the week or the module. And leverage peer evaluation. So in an online course, you have the ability to ask your students to do peer review of each other's work. And this often can sometimes lessen the amount of work on an online instructor. So if you have your students do a peer evaluation of each other's work, by the time it does get turned into you, it's one level closer to being a little more optimal example of the class assignment. In Ju, you introduced another tool into the chat. I'm not sure I'm familiar with OBS. If you have a mic with you, feel free to share further what OBS is, or in the chat if you wanted to spell that out or share a link with us, that would be great. I'm always interested to learn about new tools for collaboration. Okay. The next slide here is just a diagram that shows the online learning environment. In a traditional course, you might picture a traditional teacher-fronted environment where the students are in the class and the teacher is the center of attention. In an online course, it's a much more interactive environment. So the students are able to work much more easily with each other, and they are also much more easily able to interact with course materials, with discussions, with various assessments. And you can organize the different media in folders. Again, being very explicit, make the syllabus extremely available. It should be one of the major links in UB Learns, the Blackboard system. So just be very organized, and your students allow them to interact with the content as easily as they interact with each other. Give them opportunities to do that. The next piece I want to talk about is backwards design. So understanding by design is something that is written about this, and we have some motion sensitive lights in our office, and so I just had to make some motion beyond my computer screen so it knows that I'm here. So basically, backwards design is to first identify, and this is probably the most important point about teaching, whether it's online, face-to-face, blended, whatever. First define, what do you want your students to be able to do as a result of taking the course? Design your objectives. After you have that determined, sometimes that's determined by your program or department. Sometimes as an instructor, you have the ability to customize those objectives. Don't overload a course with too many different objectives, but you do want to kind of narrow down what is it that you want your students to be able to do when they're done with this course. After you determine that, the next step is to determine what constitutes acceptable evidence that shows that a student understands those outcomes. The next step in backwards design is to plan the instruction and the learning activities to support that assessment. So, for example, if one of my objectives in my course is to have a student be critically aware of materials that they find in the media, that their truth or falseness, I might have them demonstrate by going out and selecting some websites that might be on both sides of that spectrum, and then outlining what is, the reasons why this might be considered true information or false information based on what it is that we've learned in the class. So anybody have any questions about that? Okay, I'm gonna move to this next screen that kind of is a similar look at that same information, but it's just a little bit of a pyramid version of it. So basically the base of your instruction should be your learning objectives. Build upon that what content is going to help the students understand those objectives, and then finally the assessment. So instructional content, it might be textbooks, some articles that you find online through the libraries. You can put those right into your course. Lectures, whether they're your own created lectures or possibly some supporting materials that you find. There's many places to search for videos online. It doesn't have, lecture, is not limiting to just somebody talking to you. You might find a PBS documentary up in YouTube that would be really important to your course. Link that and make it part of your course content. At UB, make sure to connect with your subject matter specialists, the library liaison. They are very helpful to help identify what kind of materials are out there, whether it's reading materials or some video materials also. They can help you find that. You can create just a voice recorded PowerPoint, which is pretty much what this is going to end up as at the end. It's a PowerPoint, it's being recorded, and you can do something similar with this tool or many others. Lab exercises is other content that you can share, results of previous research, and then different assessments. Make sure that when you're providing assessment to your students, you provide a rubric. So a rubric is just a set of criteria. What are you going to measure when you look at the student's submission? Is grammar important? Is an understanding of the content important? Is collaboration important? What are the different pieces of the assignment that you will be basing their grade on? There's many rubrics. If you go online and search for rubric, if you're looking for something that is a rubric for a student presentation, you can go online, you can find it, and then you can put that into your UB Learns course. Simplest way is to make it a PDF and upload that. When you're talking to your student about this is the assignment, you can share a link. Here's a link to the rubric that is going to base your grade on that assignment. But the Blackboard system and also Digication, which is the new ePortfolio system that UB adopts, both of them have interactive rubrics that you can put the criteria into the system, and then when either yourself, if you're grading with that rubric, or if you have a peer grading activity, peer evaluation, students can just go into that rubric and just click on or your students can click on the different boxes in a rubric and say they've achieved the maximum level, maximum number of points, or just pass, fail, and it's easy to click those interactive rubrics to give feedback in addition to some text or even recorded feedback to a student. And also in an online class, try to keep in mind that group projects are certainly able to be accomplished. It might take a little bit, sometimes a little less effort for students to collaborate on a group project because they are all connected via these same technology tools. But sometimes it might be a little bit more challenging because students that are taking an online course may have a more full schedule, and so finding times to interact might be difficult, especially if you're asking them to do a synchronous connection. But if they are interacting asynchronously, they can communicate through discussion forums. In Blackboard, you can set up groups so that the different groups have their own discussion forum. They can have their own wiki or blog tool right within UB Learns. Also keep in mind at UB we are a Google-driven campus, so every UB student has a Google account that they have access to Google Documents. Google Documents are great for collaboration, where one student can begin a document, or like this slide presentation, I can have multiple people building this slide presentation in real time. So one person can add a slide, another person can add words to that slide or to the document. And then in the Google system, there's also a way to look at the revision history of a document. So you can go in a group situation, you can actually see who has participated in a document and to what extent. And so I just want to show you this. I'm only interacting in my own document here, but in a group situation, you can see that, you know, we had 5 people in the group. How come one of the students is not listed at all in the revision history? There might be a reason for that. That person might have been assigned the research task, and that's why they're not in the slide creation, but it does give you a little bit of background information. And Bhavya, yes, we cannot escape from Google. It's prevalent in a lot of things nowadays. Also keep in mind that UB has also partnered with Box, and so that's another collaborative tool that's available for everyone at UB, and it's a shared storage environment. So the next thing I want to share is the Oscar Course Design Review rubric. So I mentioned a rubric in my recent comments. This is a rubric to help you design a quality online course. This rubric was designed by the SUNY administration from the Center for Online Teaching Excellence. And they call it OSCAR. OSCAR stands for Open SUNY Course Quality Review. I'm pretty sure that's the acronym there. I think I might have 1 or 2 of the words wrong. With Open SUNY, it's a rubric for course design. And again, there's a link to this rubric right on the slide. And I put a link in the chat to the slides. I'll just grab that again at the end of the presentation and put it in there so you have access. And I'll try to follow up too with a link to the slides so you can access all of the resources that are shared here. But basically, the Oscar rubric is divided into 4 different categories, 4 different major categories, and then in each section there are sub-criteria. The Oscar rubric is, it's available as a PDF that you can go in and say, okay, it might be hard to read on your screen, but one of the criteria for an effective online course is that it includes a welcome and a getting started content. So that's the first item. So I can click in this column and say, yep, my course does that. The next item is that, sorry, I'm a little sensitive with the mouse. The next item is that an orientation is provided for the course overall as well as each module. So each of these different sections kind of give the ability to say, nope, there's not good enough orientation, so I need to give myself an action plan. So I put down in this rubric that my navigation is not complete, that I need to work on that. The Oscar rubric is also really great in that I can share my version of my rubric, again, if I did it through the Google Doc version of the rubric that they have available at this link, and I can share it with a couple of my colleagues. So if I wanted Martha and Bhavya to give me input on my course design, I could share my course with them. I can ask the UB Learns team to enroll them into my course, and then I can share my Oscar rubric with them, and I can say, please evaluate how you feel my course matches up to the qualities of an effective course. And then together we can have a conversation about what I need to do to make an action plan to improve the course. So it's a really great resource, and I would highly recommend. This rubric, it's specific to online, but if your face-to-face course matches up to the criteria in this rubric, I would say you also have a well-designed face-to-face course. The next item I want to talk about is just sharing some examples of an online course. A lot of times when you're first exposed to teaching online, you really have no idea what an online course is supposed to look like. So I've tried to share two different ways that you can find some examples. This first link brings you to a page that SUNY has put together that has different courses, and I think we have one in here that was done by one of our UB faculty. I'll try to pull that up as an example. Yes, Deb Brains is one of our faculty here from the School of Nursing, and she has shared her course. Need to log in. I don't know if it's going to let me log in the account that I have access to this course for. I'm not going to bother taking the time to log in on that. But you can go into these courses and request access following the information on this page, and you'll be able to actually go in and access the courses. So if you're teaching a math course, you might want to take a look at just some of these courses, but it does show you some nice examples. Also, another link on here for some example courses. There's a program called the Blackboard Exemplary Course, and that link is actually opening up an Excel document which I don't have shared Excel with you, so I'm just going to copy the link. To one of these and put it into the window for you. So the Blackboard Exemplary Course program is a yearly, I'm going to stop this for a second. It's a yearly award program that Blackboard puts out, and they put out a call and say anybody that would like to nominate their course to be considered as a Blackboard Exemplary course, you can submit to be part of this award activity. Basically, you get prestige. I don't think they have any actual monetary awards, but then they share a document that has short course tours. So, for example, I went into the Excel document that loaded upon the link, and I was able to pull up the course tours. You do have to go back. They don't have the tours for the current award period on that document. They kind of update it as they go. I went back a year or so and pulled out the course tour for fundamentals of mild to moderate disabilities, and what the person did was created a short 5-minute video about what is their course and why is it exemplary. And so you can just go through and just get some ideas, you know, how are they using maybe social media in their course? How are they using, look at how the use of visuals is supporting some of the content in this course. The way that they have the menus organized. Just because Blackboard comes with a certain set of menus, that doesn't mean that it's not customizable. So I just wanted to show you one more example of how you can look at an online course. Blackboard also has their own course design rubric. And if you do a search for the Blackboard Exemplary Course Program rubric, that should pull up for you. I didn't want to give you too many rubrics to look at, but the one that SUNY developed actually stems a little bit from the Blackboard rubric and also from the Sloan, or formerly called Sloan, Online Learning Consortium rubric called Quality Matters. It's a great opportunity to look at some examples. We have just a few minutes left. I want to leave some time for questions. I want to tell you about some opportunities, what you can do next if you're interested to teach online. The Center for Educational Innovation has a number of workshops additional webinars about online learning. There are also a number of online courses that you can enroll in, and I'll talk a little bit about those in more depth in some of the slides coming up. And we have some professional development events. We just had our annual assessment conference, which was a great learning opportunity last Friday. And I know that a number who have registered are graduate students. The CERTL community is something that UB has recently partnered. The Center for Educational Innovation and the Graduate School have partnered to become members of CERTL. And what CERTL is an online consortium of maybe 30 to 50 different institutions, prominent institutions that are members, and they have a number of events also that you can sign up for. There's a lot of different webinars. So probably the advice I have is the best way to learn how to be an effective online instructor is to first become an online student. So one of the questions I had asked early on in the webinar was if people had experience teaching online. I'm going to throw in another question here that I'd like to kind of see what comes through the chat. If have you not had experience as an online student, taking an online course? And I would say that probably my best advice to anybody that is interested to become an online instructor, first thing to do is become an online student. And so Bhavya, you've taken at least a dozen. That's great. Laura and James have also. That's really good. Yeah, I've taken quite a few. Laura has not a training module for IRB. That's an online course, just a short and condensed version. I'll share some examples a little bit further in a couple of slides, and Laura B, maybe you'll have an opportunity to sign up for one of them. There's a couple examples right through the links here on this slide too. Yes, great. Thanks, Bhavya. It's been nice having you on the webinar. Feel free to tune into the rest of the recording the next few minutes. So another opportunity, I would like to invite everyone to join us. We have an online teaching community of practice, and the first one is this coming Friday. They will be held every month for this semester, and then we will reschedule for the spring at 3 o'clock in 107 Capon. So hopefully we get an opportunity to meet in person if you're available. An online class, and Laura B, you might want to take a look at this one. Quality by Design is an online class that myself, Martha, a colleague, and another colleague from our center have helped to develop and design. And it's a 4-week online course. It's asynchronous. So the next cohort starts on October 16th. You can register for this. Since UB had helped to develop and create this program, there are no registration fees for anybody from UB or from anyone from any of the other campuses that were involved. And you can go in here and just search for QBD in order to be able to register. And if you're not from one of the campuses, it will say there's a $35 charge, but not for people from UB. So when you go and you log in and you register using your UB ID, you will not be charged to get into this course. Even if you can't participate fully in this next cohort, the course itself has a great example. I'm going to try to pull that up for you to show you what that looks like in UB Learns. Again, it's just a great example of an online course trying to model best practices. You should all go and register for this. And it's going to come up in a second. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. The Quality by Design is in the SUNY Blackboard. It's not in the UB Blackboard, so I would have to switch a bunch of windows around to get you in there. You'll just have to take my word for it that it's a great online course. This Teaching Online Introduction is another one that you can register. This is completely self-paced. This one I do have an example for you. That's a student orientation. Okay. And because I'm logged in as in Firefox instead of my, I'm going to go over to Chrome. Show you that. Five minutes, so I only have 1 or 2 slides left, so I'm going to take just a couple more seconds to be able to get that open for you. Teaching Online and Orientation. And if it doesn't let me in there, log in. There we go. So you can go to the Center for Educational Education website and you can become a participant in this course. It is completely self-paced, but there's a lot of great information in here. It's organized into a couple different modules and some great readings and videos. Again, shows you a little bit what an online course structure might look like. This next slide shows if you're trying to learn a little bit about okay. Did I lose everybody? No, I didn't. So I did. No, I didn't lose everybody. I thought I logged out of everybody. Sorry. Okay, so we didn't lose everybody. The next item is if you're interested to learn more about Blackboard, go into the UB Learns overview course, which was created by Martha. And another resource if you're interested to learn about how to use technology tools to create videos. There's some great information about video creation in there, information about using the Google suite of tools. The Tools of Engagement project is a great resource. And the final opportunity I want to share with you, if you want to become an online student in an online course, if you go to this link to enroll in a massive open online course, otherwise a MOOC, you will be able to search out courses that talk about teaching, or if you are a biology person, you can search out courses about biology, and this is one way to find a course that that you might be able to enroll in. MOOC is just a free online course, and you can go in and register for these courses. So this course that I just found is all about learning to teach online, and it's available through Coursera. I can go in and enroll in that course. I can get a certificate for about $50, but I can also just enroll in the course for free for my own time. So that is pretty much what I wanted to share with all of you about online. I was hoping it would be a little bit more of a conversation. I'm going to have to figure out how to integrate that a little bit more into the webinar. But does anybody have any questions? You can either take the mic or put a comment into the chat. I thank you all for your time and attention today. The time demands for QBD. QBD is totally asynchronous. It is offered at a 4-week schedule. You could, I'd say, adequately participate fully in the course by designating an hour, possibly 2 per week over those 4 weeks, but you can also kind of squeeze it in and maybe just get it into maybe a 30-minute commitment. You can also, if you're really interested, you can dedicate a lot of time to reading and dedicating yourself to all the resources that we have available. So if you're revising your thesis, you may not have some time, but Laura, I'd still suggest enrolling in the course. In online learning, we find there's a lot of opportunity for lurking. So I will continually register for different Coursera courses, and when I get a chance, I might listen to the audio recordings or the video recordings as I'm getting ready to go to work or on my ride into work, or just save the resources so that at a later time you can go and refer back. We can't guarantee that UB will be free in future semesters. I'm sure that we'll be able to figure it out, but we don't have that locked up just yet. So while we know it's still free for this year, and I think the spring, try to enroll in one of the cohorts. Thanks. I enjoy lurking too. So in an online environment, so I guess I should specify that. Any other questions? We are at the 1 o'clock mark. So Maya, thank you. Very helpful, not on time. That's great. So if anyone has any follow-up questions, Martha and I are here at the Center for Educational Innovation, and we would love to talk with you further. Please, if you're free on Friday, go to our online learning community. We have just a couple people that are registered for there, but we're hoping to grow it to a much bigger group. So thank you all very much. I appreciate your time and attention. Bye. Thanks. Bye, James. You're welcome, everybody.
Bye, Robin.
Bye, Martha. Thanks. Now I got to hit stop record.